My dad woke me up very early. Like I could tell. I guess I looked at the clock. It was like 6 a.m. around there, and I couldn't understand why one they were waking me up so early, and why my dad was waking me up. Usually it was my mom, and he said, "Oh," and he was like pretty calm. He just said, "Oh, Jackie, Eric's been in an accident. Your mom and I have to go to the hospital. We'll be back in a little while." Like that was all the information I got.
We know he was at the party. We know he got very highly intoxicated. We have talked to everybody at that party probably 2 or 3 times over, and we get a pretty consistent story from there. We do know that Eric did not take a ride home and he preferred to walk. He didn't live very far from the party, maybe a mile, possibly not even that, and it was a rural road that he would be traveling. We have witnesses that put him literally staggering down the road, and these witnesses are the last to see him alive.
Finally, I saw my parents' car come back, and the two of them got out without Eric. And then my mom and dad walking up the sidewalk, and I can really clearly see my mom's face. It was like so devastated. Like I've seen that face since then in the news when people's kids die. It's like, you've seen it. You can't even describe it. It's like, oh, I knew he died when I looked at her face. They didn't have to tell me because it was like so much sadness.
At some point, he was obtained, killed, and then taken back to his residence and dumped in front of his residence, at which time he was run over by a car, but he was already dead at that point.
My parents hear this car going back and forth a few times, really loud, outside the window where they were sleeping. I had the window open. Turning around, coming back, they could see, I think it was still a little dark, like they could see the lights in their window. It was late, like some people I guess would get up at like really early in the morning looking for their newspaper, so this guy's out watering his lawn, waiting for the newspaper. So this is probably like 5 a.m., 5:30. Maybe the newspaper was there at that time. It's all written down somewhere. He sees this car go by. He hears a girl screaming, which we now think was Amber, which I am certain it was Amber based on the conversation I had with her. He's seen us, because he's standing right there in the yard seeing them. He describes the car, describes the girl, etc. So what they had done then was take the dead body out, drop in the road, and go back and forth and run over it to try to make it look like this was a hit and run. The police decided, which I think was a really bad decision. We can see that his body is in like horrible shape. We can see, all these marks, burns, scrapes, etc. Big wounds. This was not, they knew it wasn't just a hit and run. The autopsy knew that he was already dead before these other wounds happened, their post-mortem. But they decided to go along with this lie because they thought the teenagers would be more likely to come forward if they thought they believed that it was a hit and run. To me, it makes sense that he wasn't totally dead. They considered, should we get help for him? And either decided, no, we're going to kill him all the way, or he just died and then they had to do something to cover it up. Another theory, which I also think has a lot of merit, is that he was just badly injured and not dead yet, but they put him in the trunk for, at that time, and tied him up. He's in the trunk, and then we know they went back to their house because other witnesses saw Brent Spalding, Amber Thomas, and Mybrit at the Spalding house, freaking out, girls crying, screaming, getting stuff out of the trunk, going around the house, moving stuff, etc.
Brent Spalding is the most probable suspect. I don't recall whether he was in trouble with the law, but he was well known within the Vicksburg community for his drug activities and for pretty much being a bully. Back when this occurred in the early 1980s, I was working in narcotics. And in the city of Portage, you would think that a lot of our drugs would travel perhaps from Kalamazoo to Portage, and that wasn't the situation at all. There was a serious drug problem in the Vicksburg community. The people in Vicksburg knew it. They tried dealing with it, weren't completely successful with it, but the intelligence that we were getting and I was getting at Portage Police Department consistently pointed me to Vicksburg, and most of the cases I worked ended up being Vicksburg or South Portage residents. South Portage butts up to the Vicksburg community area.
They keep saying this rumor in the news, even on the Crime Watch Daily Show, that, you know, maybe Erik was hood surfing with them, which I completely reject that. I don't know why they keep bringing it up. There's no way he would not have done that, because this boy, Brent Spalding, bullied him at school, bullied him at the party, was like his official bully. You're not going to go hood surfing with your bully.
Right.
He was seen pushing Erik into the pop machine, beating Erik up, calling him gay all the time. Like, he was a very, very mean to Erik, and there's many eyewitnesses to that, so that is completely false.
In the 80s, bullying was handled school to school differently. Bullying was just seen as kind of a way of growing up. You adjusted to it as just another adversity. Some students would take it on themselves, like where I went to school at Hackett.
At that time, it was kind of like, they get together, he'd fight, then the teachers just pull him apart and just be like, okay, go back to class. Like, they didn't take it that seriously, I was probably in 9th grade before the kids started telling me, teenagers who were older than me, who knew the truth, because they all knew too.
Oh, wow.
Because the Spalding had bragged about killing Erik, Amber had bragged about being there, his sister, Mybrit, had cried about it. So, they'd all told like a ton of people, and they had a big assembly about it at this high school, trying to get people to tell what they knew, etc. When Brent Spalding confesses to his friend, he says, Erik was laying by the tree. I tied a rope around, one side of the rope around Erik and the other side around the back of the car, and then drove around the block. When Brent Spalding says that, and I believe him, the multiple people that he's told that he kills Erik, I think he's telling the truth to those people. He doesn't have any reason to lie and say he killed him if he didn't. They interviewed him. His parents put him in a mental institution to protect him, and then that made the police give up. I was like, okay, so that made sense to me for a while, but then now as an adult, I think that makes no sense. Like,
Right.
You can't just go to a mental hospital to get out of murder and then they just drop it. That doesn't make sense at all. So, but I understand why my mom thought that, because then when I finally from her lawyer got the copy of the police report, that is how it read. It's like, we're investigating all these people, we're interviewing tons of people, we narrow down to the Spaldings and his friends. We try to interview as many of them as we can. We get a witness that comes in December 1983, says, Brent told me how he killed Erik. This is what he said, 4-page statement, passes a lie detector. The dad comes to the friend, says, you don't want to go to the police because, then Brent will get punished and everything will be horrible, blah, blah, blah. Like, you tried to talk him out of going. But the friend went anyway. So I think that's the time then the dad, because he knew the friend was going, takes Brent away. Then the last line is, Brent Spalding is put into this mental hospital, case open pending further investigation, ... That's it.
It's theorized that was part of the cover-up, building a mental illness defense. We've got that covered pretty well in the investigation.
I think they don't want to embarrass themselves because it looks so bad. But I mean, everybody already knows. Like, it's all out there in the public. Like, yes, you already look bad. Like, now try to look good. I mean, they're not keeping any secrets. Like, how bad could it be? You go back there, you say people who probably are dead or retired should have done something and didn't. Like, okay, so now we're going to fix it. I don't really know why they don't want to deal with it. I mean, people, I guess, in general don't want to deal with their department looking bad, but they look bad now, so.
Every prosecutor in the world wants to have a case that they can present that is rock solid, foolproof, 100% guaranteed. And any attorney worth their license will tell you there's no such thing. And when you get to cold case, it's even less of a probability. There is no such thing as a perfect case. And I think with a prosecutor expecting that, no case will ever really proceed anywhere.
100%, I do not feel like they did the best they could. My father didn't feel like it. My father, for a while, did the same thing I've been doing, or that I did for a while, where he wrote letters to the editor. He, bothered the medical examiner, said, you should go back and look at this again. This prosecutor, Getting, and the last prosecutor, Fink, care more about their little win rate percentage, which is just a tiny, some kind of weird macho posturing, because what citizen can you ever find that says, I want my prosecutor to have a 99% win rate no matter what? So don't arrest people if you don't think you can win. If they've got a good lawyer, don't arrest them because, winning the case is more important. No one says that. No one cares about that. It's some kind of ego thing they've got going on. So yes, you are not safe in Kalamazoo. Fink, who was the prosecutor right before Getting, he was there. I mean, and Getting used to be employed by Fink. I mean, they're all been working together. There's not been Getting claimed, our current prosecutor, that he was going to come in and clean house because he had been fired by Fink, and so he was putting himself up as I'm going to deal with these cold cases, I'm going to clean everything out, blah blah blah, which he has not done in any way.
Well, would you say politics ever interfere with cases in Kalamazoo?
No, it's really never ever interfered. There was always that separation. Never had that problem with any police agency, any prosecutorial agency, even the courts. It was never that way.
I don't know what Kalamazoo County's, who they're serving, if they're not serving citizens like my parents, who are upstanding citizens of the world, or I think the best people, even though I might be prejudiced, but I mean just objectively, my mom, church lady, librarian, my dad, engineer, I always followed the rules, always followed the law. So you have to be here longer to get justice. You have to know more people to get justice. The killer has to have a worse lawyer for you to get justice. The killer has to be poor and black to get justice. There's so many things, issues that I think are spoken to there and I learned and believed for, 12 years at least, that killers or people would be punished if there was, evidence for them to be punished, or if everyone knew that they did it, or if they ran around the town telling everyone they did it. But then I discovered that that's not the case. I saw that one of Erik's killers had a Facebook page, so I decided Erik should have one too. And really that was the only reason I started it, was just because I was mad that he was still out there running around doing stuff and showing off about it, and I felt like his victims should also have a page to share or whatever. But people from Vicksburg started contacting me because some people just assumed that the case had been solved, that they'd already been arrested, because a lot of people graduated. That was the graduation party that Erik went to. And everyone knew who the guilty ones were. So several people were just like, what do you mean? They never arrested them? How can that even be?
I went to the sheriff's department as the undersheriff, and it was about a year or so after that I was inquiring about all the cold cases, and the Cross case came up. And I had long since forgotten about it, as had most of the people who 30 years later, when something's not solved, they forget about it. So I talked to the investigators, read the case over real thorough, and when I read it, I thought it was a fairly decent case, and I was a little bit surprised that this hadn't been presented to the prosecutors to begin with.
The sheriff's department, I started talking to them. I talked to them before, in 2000, because they'd started the cold case team, but it kind of been put on the shelf for a while. And they encouraged me, because they said, okay, well, keep putting stuff out there, and then we'll see if people will start, talking and gossiping about stuff. Then the Kalamazoo Gazette did a story about which I think was largely about how this Facebook page had brought new information to the case. And that's when my parents' lawyer contacted me and said, oh, I have the whole case file and the police report, etc., if you'd like to read it. I said, yes, my mom signed a waiver. I went in there and read it, and that was just like, I guess, when I read that, it blew me away because we'd heard so many rumors, but I didn't realize, no, all of these things are documented. Like I told you, people took lie detectors, they had many people come in and say that Brent had confessed to the crime. They had, lots of evidence, and still nothing was done. Because I kind of thought, well, guess they didn't have enough. I'm like, oh my gosh, you not only have enough, this is only and that only went to 1983, and then they reopened it in 2000, traveled around the country, interviewed more people, dug things up, excavated things, had physical evidence. And I don't even have the police report for all that. I just know about it.
In my opinion, we have very strong evidence to charge murder on at least one individual. We have very strong evidence of perjury on yet another. The cases are not as strong on some of them, but they are good enough to proceed.
That's when we started the Erik Cross Memorial Foundation, and part of it was because I felt like when I got to a point where we'd done a lot of investigating kind of ourselves. My husband and I had gone and interviewed several of the people. I talked to Amber on the phone, just kind of trying to get to the point where, okay, I feel like I know what happened, so what can I do? I'm not a police person.
Right near that time, the Erik Cross Army, I like to call them, did a news feature that our local channel, WWMT, did, and it was Erik Cross's 49th birthday, and they did a story on it. Well, it was within days after that story, we got a call at the Sheriff's Department from a witness who gave us some very key information that fit dead center into the investigation. And this person had no bias either way, didn't even live in the community at the time this occurred, but it rang bells with this particular witness. So a very valuable piece that gave the case a jump start. So we went back to Alex Jokic at Channel 3, gave her the story, and we said, this is what we'd like to do, but we need some help with the media. She ran it to her producers. The producer says, great. And so we just did a big media splash on the case that this case is kicked up, and we've got more information, and suspects know who they are. They've known who they are for 30 years because they've all been, most of them have been talked to at one point or another, and under different circumstances. And says, here you go. This is your last chance. The olive branch is out there. If you want to talk, we're willing to listen. We're willing to deal with you. Well, none of them took that, but it did generate hundreds of phone calls. And when you're an investigator, and especially cold case, you have an obligation to look at every last one of those calls. And that took about a year to do. It was every week we were getting 2-3 calls, and I would say 50% of them were, I heard from this person who heard from that person who knew a guy, and those were just way too deep into the rumor mill. Maybe another 15, 20% or 25% of them were things we had heard before. Most all of it we had heard before, and we followed up on it, and it took us back to kind of where we were to begin with. But that last 10% or so, that was all new stuff. These were new witnesses coming forward that added to the case.
I couldn't believe that after everything that had been done, that nobody had done anything. But we came across it on the Facebook, the Justice for Erik group. We joined, we got involved, we volunteered, we came to events like this, and we just wanted to help spread the word.
I couldn't get out of my head that nothing was ever done, and so I kind of hooked up with a group, and I think I've been active with them for about 3 years, maybe a little more than 3 years now, and I'm not going to quit. It could have been anybody, but it was Erik, and his family they deserve justice.
We all know who did it. There isn't anybody that's from Vicksburg that does not know who did this. and they're beyond suspects. Their names are out there. They can't hide any longer. Brent and Brian and Bill and Amber and
Tim.
deceased sister Mybrit and Tim.
And
They
probably Tim's brother.
and
I'm not
probably
gonna say
Tim's
the name.
brother. And they can't hide anymore. The media has made it so they cannot hide. We've also helped make it so you can't hide. You just
No.
can't hide anymore, and we're not
You know
going to
what?
go away. We're the ones that we made up. We put posters up. You rip them down. We're going to put them right back up. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter, and they don't like seeing Erik's face.
I had 2 more kids, and my mom said, you know, you need to focus on your living children. And I got to the point where I agreed with her. I'm like, this is way too stressful, and I can't neglect my living kids to like focus on my dead brother. I would like it all to come together to where his life, would inspire them, which I think it has to some extent. But that's when, Missy and Erik's Army, the other people, there's so many people, I don't want to start listing them because there's like tons of people who have really helped to like pick up the ball and run with it. And that really inspired me because because I couldn't, and my mom didn't want me to, even the beginning stuff, I was doing that, she didn't want me to even do it, so, I couldn't keep doing it, she didn't want me to. So, what really inspired me is that those people, that Erik's life meant enough to them, and what happened to him, that a lot of those, some of them I knew from school, Missy, I ran track with her, etc. But some of them I never knew, it's not like they're doing it because they're our friends or relatives, they are working for Erik's Army because they, care about the cause. And I never would have thought that other people I never knew, before we had the Facebook and everything else, that anyone else even remembered him. The organization, I'm happy with what they're doing. I want the organization to be something positive, to come out of what happened to Erik. That's all I can hope for, is that something positive can come out of it.
There needs to be someone held accountable for Erik's murder. At the very least, several people need to own up to what they did, because the whole community knows. The whole community knew, and nobody ever said anything. It's that small town mentality where just push it under the rug, and it's time to shake the rug out.
Erik was my classmate. He's a year younger than me, and all the murderers are my classmates. They're 1983 and 1985 graduates. When I found out that it was Jackie and we talked, I couldn't believe that this case was not prosecuted. It was just unbelievable that it just got swept under the rug like this.
It simply turned cold. The key factor was people just did not want to get involved. The suspects in this case kind of closed ranks, built a brick wall. They had some help in trying to do a cover-up, and the cover-up seemed to be working. So when you combine the cover-up with way too many people not wanting to get involved, that really put the brakes on this thing, and it went cold for quite a long time. Cold cases rely heavily on witnesses, and this case would be no different. It will rely heavily on witnesses. They will eventually talk. I think the conditions have to be right for that. Each one's lives have gone a different direction. The things that you don't talk about when you're 16, 17, now that you're 50 years old, those loyalties and those reasons are gone. A lot of them were afraid of Brent Spalding at the time. They thought they would probably be next, or he was just going to be a bully with them, so they didn't want to have anything to do with it. Well, if you see Brent Spalding now, it's hard to be afraid of him. He's not really able to pull that off very well anymore. But now their lives have gone on, and they've got a lot to lose. We look at one witness in particular, one of the suspects who has a tremendous amount to lose, who probably should have accepted the olive branch.
For these individuals to be involved in setting up this false scene for my dad to find, and then the parents being involved in covering it up, is just awful. And for them to maintain it all these decades, and it's just horrible.
I'm not surprised that people are still withholding information. They just don't want to get involved. That's human behavior. It's a very, very poor excuse because you're allowing a murderer to run free, and murderers have a way of doing it again too. I look at the suspects in this particular case, and most of their lives have just gone to heck. Nothing's ever really happened productive in their lives except for maybe one. As far as my life goes, I wanted to see this case come to a conclusion before I retired. I was pretty certain it was there, and that's why it was submitted to the prosecutor before I retired. We didn't get that level of cooperation out of that office, so the case is still very active and is moving hopefully into another jurisdiction.
People told me that they would tell their teenagers, people my age would say as their kids were in high school, they would tell their kids the story of Erik and use it to say to them, if you have any, thank you, that they would say to their kids, if you are at a party and you have a problem or you're in trouble, just call me no matter what, even if you're drunk or in the place you're not supposed to be, because Erik was not where he said he was going to be. My parents didn't know he was going to be at that party. He was supposed to be spending the night at Bill Cook's house, his friend. These people from Vicksburg and beyond have used Erik's story as a cautionary tale to their kids. Makes me feel like, well, maybe other people, have been, if they have been saved by his story, we didn't even know about it. Or if teenagers in general just know that they can ask their parents for help. It's more important to stay alive and safe than to maintain whatever false story you've told your parents.
Well, one thing, my mom said back in 2010, and she said the names, but I'll just say blank is a non-person, blank is a non-person. Those are the two main people she blames. Let them destroy themselves. Let them destroy themselves is, it's kind of like, well, yeah, they are doing that. It's like, okay, so yes, they will and are destroying themselves pretty much. But that, to me, it's not good enough as a society. Yes, it's what happens when you try to avoid responsibility. But that, why do people get arrested? It's not to bring Erik back. It's not for revenge. That's definitely not it. It's just because, one, to keep them from hurting other people, because they, many of them have been in and out of jail hurting other people, and we don't know if that could escalate. Two, to send the message, no, you cannot commit a crime, and you cannot get away with murder.
It doesn't matter how much time you have or what your circumstances are. If you want to make a difference, if you want to make things better around you, just get involved, even in the smallest way, because it does create change.
I think justice will come to Erik Cross. I'm not confident that it will come through the Kalamazoo County Prosecutor's Office. He's had this case for 8 months already and hasn't even so much as said a word to the victim, and that's just uncalled for. He is an elected official, and it's his prerogative. If he wants to sit on the case for another 34 years, he can do that. But he still has to answer to the community, and the community has said, if you're not going to do anything, we need to move it on. So we've asked that the community and the family actually has asked for the Attorney General, Bill Schuette, to accept the case. And I see now that the state senator who represents this area has also asked him to step in and take jurisdiction on it.
That you've got to try. You've at least got to try to take it as far as you can. I sincerely do have faith that Mr. Schuette will hopefully do something.
The family wants someone to at least try. And that's just the whole thing. At least try. Just don't walk away from it and say, no, we're not going to do it. You got to at least try. and that's where I've always been since I got involved with the case. At least try.